6:01 on Tuesday, March 22nd. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And I think we can, Nancy, if you want to start out with the public hearing announcements, go ahead with both of them. I see the mayor is here. I'm just getting us rolling with our public hearing announcements.
Thank you.
All right, Council, I will try to go quick through this. The public hearing tonight is for the renewal of liquor licenses. Notice is hereby given that between the 13th day of January 2022 and the municipal due date of 15th day of February 2022, the following have filed applications for renewal of liquor licenses in the office of the city clerk of the city of Laramie, Wyoming for the following described places and premises. Retail liquor licenses, Laramie Lanes Incorporated, doing business as Laramie Lanes, 1270 North 3rd Street. High Elevation Investments, LLC, doing business as Mulligan's, 1115 South 3rd Street. Walmart Stores Incorporated, doing business as Walmart Superstore, number 1412, 4308 Grand Avenue. Hensley Property Holdings, LLC, doing business as Roxy's on Grand, 221 Grand Avenue. Coyote Land Incorporation, doing business as Cowboy Saloon and Dance Hall, 108 South 2nd Street. E&K Smith Enterprises, doing business as Alibi Wood Fire Pizza and Bakery, 404 South 4th Street. Big D Oil Company, doing business as Big D Oil Company, number 44 at 1561 Snowy Range Road, Laramie, Wyoming. Copper's Bar LLC, doing business as Copper's Liquor Lounge at 867 North 3rd Street. Electra Property Holdings LLC, doing business as Bud's Bar, 354 West University Avenue. Safeway Stores 46 Incorporated, doing business as Safeway Stores 46, located at 554 North 3rd Street. Sweet Melissa's Incorporated, doing business as Sweet Melissa's Cafe and Front Street Tavern at 213 South 1st Street. AB Laramie, Wyoming, LLC, doing business as Applebee's Neighborhood Bar and Grill at 3209 Grand Avenue. Jazza Inc., doing business as Reed's Liquor at 310 South 5th Street. Corner Pocket of Laramie Incorporated, doing business as Mingles of Laramie, 3206 Grand Avenue. WRCH Laramie LLC, doing business as Wyoming's Rib and Chop House, 2415 Grand Avenue. Buckhorn Enterprises Incorporated, doing business as Buckhorn Bar, 114 Ivinson Avenue. SDR LLC, doing business as O'Dwyer's at 1622 East Grand Avenue. AKME LLC, doing business as The Still at 502 South 3rd Street. Ridley's Family Markets Incorporated, doing business as Ridley's Family Markets, 3112 Grand Avenue. Wagon Wheel Incorporated, doing business as Wagon Wheel Incorporated, 334 Fillmore Street. Gateway Fuels LLC, doing business as Gateway Liquors at 2471 Jackson Street. First Street Station Incorporated, doing business as Altitude Chop House and Brewery at 3220 South 2nd Street. Ranger Liquor Mart and Bar LLC, doing business as Ranger Liquor Mart and Bar at 4363 North 3rd Street. Northridge Discount Liquors Incorporated, doing business as North Street Discount Liquors at 1660A North 4th Street. Yasau Inc., doing business as 3rd Street Bar and Grill at 220 Grand Avenue. Crowbar and Grill LLC, doing business as Crowbar and Grill at 202 South 2nd Street. Chalk and Cheese LLC, doing business as Chalk and Cheese at 209 South 2nd Street. Restaurant liquor licenses, The New Mandarin Inc., doing business as The New Mandarin at 1254 North 3rd Street. Bernie's Mexican Restaurant LLC, doing business as Bernie's Mexican Restaurant at 367 Snowy Range Road. Guerin Enterprises Inc., doing business as Cold Creek Coffee Company at 110 East Grand Avenue. Australius Inc., doing business as Andale Rapido at 2900 East Grand Avenue, Unit 108. Villas Inc., doing business as Corona Village at 513 Boswell Drive. Bighorn Associates LC, doing business as Chili's Grill, 2523 Grand Avenue, Suite F. Yellow Star Restaurants, Inc., doing business as Miso Sushi at 307 South 3rd Street. Anong's Thai Cuisine, LLC, doing business as Anong's Thai Cuisine at 101 East Ivinson Avenue. Nico Sushi and Japanese Food, LLC, doing business as Nico Sushi and Steak at 1702 Grand Avenue. Jay's Prairie Rose, Inc., doing business as Prairie Rose Cafe, 410 South 2nd Street. Palermo's Italian Restaurant, doing business as Palermo's Italian Restaurant at 207 South 3rd Street. The Bistro, LLC, doing business as Jeffrey's Bistro at 123 Ivinson Avenue. Night Heron Enterprises, LLC, doing business as Night Heron Books and Coffee House at 107 East Ivinson Avenue. Guerin Enterprises, Inc., doing business as Coal Creek Coffee at 2317 East Grand Avenue. Movie Palace, Inc., doing business as Studio City, UW Plaza Cinemas at 2433 East Grand Avenue. Eat Sleep Barbecue, LLC, doing business as Dickey's Barbecue Pit at 2410 East Grand Avenue. Bar and Grill restaurant licenses include Sherlock Investments, LLC, doing business as the Library Sports Bar and Grill at 201 East Custer Street. Sushi Boat, LLC, doing business as Sushi Boat at 421 Boswell Drive. Schull Reese, LLC, doing business as Barn and a Barn at 100 East Ivinson Avenue. RS Development, LLC, doing business as Lovejoy's Bar and Grill at 101 Grand Avenue. Speed Goat Laramie, LLC, doing business as Speed Goat, 213 Grand Avenue. Cask 307, LLC, doing business as Cask 307, 111 East Grand Avenue. Accomplice Laramie, LLC, doing business as Accomplice Micro Pub at 301 Grand Avenue. Maria's Mexican Grill and Cantina, LLC, doing business as Maria's Mexican Grill and Cantina at 223 Adams Street. Microbrewery licenses, First Street Station Incorporated, doing business as Altitude Chop House and Brewery at 320 South 2nd Street. Sherlock Investments, LLC, doing business as the Library Sports Bar and Brewery at 201 East Custer Street. Coal Creek Tap Incorporated, doing business as Coal Creek Tap, 108 East Grand Avenue. Bonds Brewing Company, LLC, doing business as Bonds Brewing Company, 411 South 2nd Street. Club and limited liquor licenses include Laramie Moose Lodge, 309, Loyal Order of Moose, 409 South 3rd Street. BPO Elks Lodge number 582, Laramie Elks Club at 103 South 2nd Street. Houston Pendleton Post number 14, American Legion at 417 Ivinson Avenue. Fraternal Order of Eagles, Aries number 3493 at 126 Lion Street. Golf Club liquor license is the Jacoby Golf Club, doing business as Jacoby Golf Club at 3501 Willett Street. Resort liquor licenses include Timberline Hospitalities, LLC, doing business as Holiday Inn at 204 South 30th Street. Hotel Investment Services, GI Incorporated, doing business as Hilton Garden Inn at 2229 Grand Avenue. Special malt beverage permits include the trustees of the University of Wyoming, doing business as the University of Wyoming, Wyoming Union Building, University of Wyoming Campus, City of Laramie. Roxy's Catering, LLC, doing business as Roxy's Catering, University of Wyoming Arena Auditorium, excluding Mickey's. Winery includes The Great Untamed, LLC, doing business as The Great Untamed at 209 South 3rd Street. Notice it's hereby given also that on the 17th day of February 2022, the following have filed applications for renewal of liquor licenses in the office of the City Clerk of the City of Laramie for the following described places and premises. Club and limited retail liquor license includes Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 2221 at 2142 East Grand Avenue, or at East Garfield Street. Public hearing to hear comments and protests relative to the renewal of these liquor licenses will be held Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022 at 6:00 p.m. in council chambers of City Hall via Zoom. Licenses will be considered for renewal at the regular meeting of the City Council on Tuesday, April 5th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. in council chambers via Zoom. All information relative to this matter is available for review at the City of Laramie City Clerk's office at 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming. Anyone wishing to be heard should be present or may be represented by his or her agent at the meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. That was a comprehensive list. Thank you, City Clerk, very much. I doubt anybody else would have been able to read it any faster, so we appreciate it. All right. That is the notice for this public hearing. And we will now open the public hearing for comments from those in attendance on those liquor license renewals. Seeing none, City Council, we'll close the public hearing. And move on to the special meeting. City Clerk, would you mind giving us an announcement for the special meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a special meeting of the Laramie City Council will be held Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022 at 6:00 p.m. via Zoom webinar ID 844-8594-5399, passcode 314754 for the following purpose. Number 1, original ordinance number 2042, amending Laramie Municipal Code Chapter 2.04 to adjust ward boundaries to have nearly equal proportions after the 2020 census.
Thank you. You've heard the notice for the special meeting. We'll now call the special meeting to order for March 22nd, 2022. City Clerk, may I have a roll call, City Council members?
Cumbie.
Here.
Gabriel.
Here.
Harrington.
Here.
O'Doherty.
Here.
Schmeckel.
Here.
Schuster.
Here.
Somerville.
Here.
Pierce.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
That's 9 present and 0 absent, Your Honor.
That's all members present. Thank you, City Clerk and City Council members. The special meeting, as was stated, is to give the City Council an opportunity to work through the third and final reading, or potentially extend discussion about the City Council wards as a result of the 10-year census. So we will now move to that item, and I will give Councilmember O'Doherty the floor.
I move to approve original ordinance number 2042 on third and final reading, amending Laramie Municipal Code Chapter 2.04 to adjust ward boundaries to have nearly equal proportions after the 2020 census and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I would like to post, well, I'm not sure if this is the time to do this. Do we want to have a discussion first?
Well, there's not going to be a good time, so now is the time probably to get whatever's going to generate discussion. So yeah.
Okay, so I would like to move to postpone. Let's see if I get this right. The city clerk tried to help me. Let me first explain the boundaries of the House districts are not set in stone yet, and the county clerk is trying to figure out how to administer this, and mentioned that we could postpone for 2 weeks from today, and she could still get all of her deadlines in order. So, but I also wanted to propose an amendment, which is a word map that's kind of similar to the status quo,
but I know that 5 counselors are not at all excited about that. So I'm not sure what to do about that unless Pat just wants to get it on the table so everybody can vote against it.
Why don't, Councilmember O'Doherty, why don't we consider the first part of the discussion,
Okay.
which is postponement?
Okay, so I move to postpone, and then I would ask us to have a discussion of other of map options in the meantime.
I think what the city clerk is going to tell us is that procedurally we probably need to have the motion amended if that's going to be the direction we go first, and then we can talk about the discussion of postponement because that's the way it needs to go. Now, I would also offer this, Councilmember O'Doherty, we can probably have a discussion about both topics before a formal amendment is adopted. If that's agreeable to the motion maker and the second, why don't we go ahead and open this up for sort of a general discussion on the 2 points for the council and members of the public that may want to comment, and then procedurally we'll vote in or not vote in whatever amendments are appropriate. City Clerk, does that meet with your approval in terms of procedure? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, and appreciate you're always trying to help us stay on the correct way to do things. Councilmember Doherty, you raised a couple of points already, but I'll give you an opportunity to go ahead and expand on those, and we'll go around council members for discussion, unless there's any objection to the direction that we're going at this time. I think Councilmember Harrington has an objection. Councilmember Harrington.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, that's a bit out of order. I don't have an objection. I'm just not sure if we have. So we're just on a motion to approve at this point, right? There's not a postponement motion because I didn't hear one, but we're just on the original motion, right?
At this point, I think what my interpretation as chair is, without any objection from you council members, is we have a motion to bring the entirety of this on the floor for discussion about direction that we're going to go, and we can talk in this discussion to 2 points: postponement and the idea of a different map in a general way. And then after we figure out where we're going with that discussion, then we'll consider formal motions. Without objection, that's I think what we're doing.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Sorry.
Mayor,
go ahead.
I think my statement is on the original motion, and that is it's the map that we called 1B. When I was cleverly drawing those borders, I was looking at population based on the census and not the typical number of voters in that section. So when I called the county clerk to say, how does this jive with election administration, she invited me over because they were trying to deal with it. So I came over to their office and saw that can we put map 1B up, Nancy? I could pull it if you need me to. I mean, city clerk.
I think the city clerk has it coming for us.
So the red lines, if anyone in the public is watching, the red lines are the House district boundaries, and the colored areas are the 3 different wards proposed in 1B. And what I didn't get when I didn't put it together when I was drawing this map, that as just because a census district has 1,600 people in it, it doesn't have necessarily a lot of voters. So as that area of the dorms, as that moves over in the coming years, we could be left with just fraternity row voters. And right now that totals about 38 people. So that has to become its own precinct, and then it's just going to be like this shrinking voter number. So one reason I'd like to postpone is just to see what the legislature is going to do. But I'd also like to at least come up with a map that would be that would get rid of that sliver there, and that would take time. And since the county clerk said that we are not in as big a hurry as we originally thought, that I would like us to have time to consider that. So So that's my issue with this 1B and why I'm opposed to it.
Thank you, Councilmember Doherty. Council members, I would point out that around 4 o'clock, we received a communication from the county clerk's office expressing, I think on behalf of the office as a whole, a variety of concerns about the map that was adopted at the last meeting. So if you haven't had a chance to read that, I'd recommend that you do that. And if you have, then you're up to speed with the conversation. Council members Schmeckel and Somerville, I don't know which one of you raised your hand first because I wanted to make the point about the letter. Okay, I'll go to Council member Somerville and then I'll go to Council member Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Schmeckel. So I just wanted to kind of touch on a few things that Council Doherty said that I'm in complete agreement with, which is it sounds like the clerk would be more comfortable if we went ahead and postponed due to some uncertainty. I'm in full support of that. Also, I had a chance to have a brief conversation with the clerk and would very much welcome the opportunity to work on that map some more and look at those possibilities over the next 2 weeks during that postponement to see what we can tidy up and bring back. And it may, we may be able to just adjust both proposal 3 and 1B and bring them both back to council or however that'll work. But I'm certainly comfortable with that. And I just wanted to let council know, I hear that concern. We certainly don't want to create undue burden with the clerk's office that we've always had a good relationship with in terms of elections. So I would support the motion to postpone tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say that I will also echo that I'm comfortable with postponing the discussion here, but I think that if we're going to have extra time, there's questions I would like to have answered. I do see that the county clerk's office and potentially maybe even the clerk herself is in our audience, and it might be appropriate to include them here into the discussion here with this. But specifically, my 2 questions are in relation to the document that she sent us that cites 2 questions or 2 areas of concern. The first is this voter block that would be pretty minimal and left over after the UW dorms were moved from the current location to the new location. My question is, if we're able to account for the planning of UW's moves with the current ward maps as we're proposing, why aren't we addressing Wyotech's planned expansions? I feel like to give preference to UW over a private entity is not within the spirit of this process. Additionally, I would like to know, because her second point is talking about splitting an identified area of town that identifies itself as being different. I'm curious why we are not allowed or that there are concerns about splitting the West Laramie and West Side area as opposed to, say, the Tree area or the Corthell Hill area. What defines these areas as some of them are able to be divided and some of them aren't?
Thank you, Councilmember Schmeckel. Next, I have Councilmember Gabriel, and then I have Councilmember Schuster. And we'll make sure to go around, make sure everybody's had a chance to weigh in on the issue. Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Yesterday, I had a chance to email the county clerk. I've worked with her for 20 years as a county commissioner, have the utmost really respect for her in her office. And so I hadn't heard from her since we had made this vote last week when we passed it on second reading. I knew this was coming up tonight. And so I just wanted to get the clerk's opinion on where we were since I hadn't heard anything. So in light of what we had a discussion email wise, this is what came up. And so I certainly am in approval of postponement. Councilmember Somerville really summarized it very well. We need to do some more work. Councilmember Schmeckel has some good points. So I just think that we need to step back. We've got a couple of weeks. Governor still hasn't signed the redistricting bill, as the county clerk has mentioned. We still have a question there. So we still have some issues before us. And I think we need to step back and hopefully have something ready in a couple of weeks. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Appreciate comments. Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you. Just wanted to give everybody a brief history of Laramie and these wards and everything else. 26 years ago, there were no wards, 0. Every person voted for every council person on here. There were no maps. 4 ran 1 2-year term, or every 2 years, and then 5 ran the other 2 years. They were still 4-year seats. Then 22 years ago, a petition was, no, I'd say 24 years ago, a petition was started, and they wanted to break it into wards. And their first attempt at it was they wanted to have people from every section of town, just like we're trying to do now. So when they got the petition going, they came up that there would be 7 wards, so it was worse yet. We split the city into 7 pies and then did 2 at large, and again, it was 4 people running and then 5 people running for 4-year terms, but they were 2-year increments apart. Then they decided they didn't like that because they didn't like the at-large and everything else, and that is finally when we got to where we are now, and they split the city into thirds with 3 people in each ward, and 2 would run on 1 term ticket and the other one, oddball, would run on the other term ticket. And when they went from the boundaries from 7 wards to 3 wards, there was a lot of people upset. I mean, I've seen just a couple of letters right now and emails and calls to me, and I said, well, you should have seen it last time we did this redistricting. And I think some people need to realize that this is going to be the normal. That every 10 years when we take a census, they're going to change. We'd love to say that, no, we're going to do this great thing right now, and we can see the growth patterns for the city. And no, I did not see the growth patterns for the city 10 years ago where they are growing now. So it's going to be something to do this, and we are giving it our best educated guess. And that's what I see a lot of times happening. But I understand some people say, well, I don't want the line here, and I don't want the line here, and the dorms are going to change here, and this is going to change there, and this is all going to be changed again in 10 years. And who knows if we're done building dorms in 10 years. So what growth patterns are going to happen to University of Wyoming? What growth patterns are going to happen to Wyotech? What new businesses are going to open in this city to generate more jobs and more people? Love to say we can just nail that down tonight, and no, not a chance. My estimates 10 years ago were nothing close to what's happened, and my estimates for the next 10 years are probably not going to be that much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. All right, let's see. Well, I think everybody's had a go that wants to for their first time. Councilmember O'Doherty, I'm gonna ask you to wait just a second for your second time. I haven't had a chance to weigh in a little bit on this. I agree with what Councilmember Schuster just said, and I appreciate his going through the background. I certainly remember paying attention to the process in 2012. I also agree with Councilmember Schmeckel's points very much. And I think this is really the heart of this discussion, which is that the concerns about West Laramie and the West Side, in addition to how much they drive budgetary issues for the city in terms of infrastructure investments and what kind of investments we need to make there and what kind of allocations we need to make there, are once again directing the discussion around ward drawing. And it does seem that there is an interest to continue to allow the 2 neighborhoods to drive a lot of the process for everything that the city does, that if you look at it objectively, other neighborhoods in the city aren't driving to the same extent. And as Councilmember Schuster says, we don't know about growth patterns. We don't know about, the future issues that are going to rear their heads and cause some discussion and some challenges for the city. I would say that given what we have planned, which we do know, infrastructure concerns at the east and at the north, for that matter, are going to be pressing issues for the city, pressing on our budget, pressing on what we do for planning, and driving discussion and hard policy decisions as much as anywhere else in the city will be in the coming years. That's based just on what we have planned. That's based on the Bill Nye growth. That's based on North 4th Street growth. That's based on where we see developers taking a look at building new homes. Those things are coming as well, and they're going to be driving discussions as well. So we have this responsibility to balance all of that, and it's certainly rising to the surface with this discussion. So just something to keep in mind. All right, Councilmember O'Doherty, I had you next.
I just wanted to answer the reason, for Councilor Schmeckel, the reason that we were conscious of the dorms is that they're right on the boundary of the House District. So a bunch of us thought it would be clever because it's the densest census block in the whole, probably the whole state, but it is the densest one. So there's 1,600 voters right at the edge of the boundary between House District, what's going to be 13, and House District 45, and House District 14. So it's right at the corner, whereas the Wyotech would stay in the same area no matter what. So that's not right on an edge. If it were right on an edge, I'd want to propose that we, if it was coming up in the next few years, it's a good reason to keep it together. But I would like to at least have us clean up and not have a little precinct sitting there that could potentially have 38 voters in a couple of years.
Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. In regards to the 38 voters that actually voted from the dorms or from the sorority house and fraternity houses in that area, you know that there are more than 38 actual people, right? So to say there's just 38, it to me represents a historical mark, either in the last election or the last election, that 38 people who were not dorm residents but sorority and fraternity members that actually voted. That number could double, triple, who knows what that number could be in the future, much more or less. The other thing there are so many things that we've taken into consideration having to do with this topic. We know our census numbers are off. We tried to account for, where that population of people lived and now are again, returning to. We considered development. We considered many, many topics, and you can't predict the future, basically, like Councilor Schuster was saying. So from my perspective, that 38 number could be a whole lot more. And who's to say they're going to have sororities and fraternities? That may absolutely change. Our previous president was a strong supporter. I haven't heard the current president say one word about fraternities and sororities. So, you don't even know if that's going to be an option, 5 years down the road. I'm a former sorority gal. And I'm telling you, they come, they go, they change. I don't know. It's just, it's not enough of a reason for me to be totally concerned about those 38 people.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. City Clerk, do you have a procedural thing for us?
Mayor, not procedural, but just a point of information. When we spoke with the the Albany County Clerk today, the elections team had brought up that their concern deals more with confidentiality when you do have under 200 voters in one area. So I just wanted to put that out for the council to consider. Right.
But the numbers either below or above 200 are dependent on election turnout in any given year. It's not a static concern, is my understanding, City Clerk. Is that also your understanding? Those numbers are determined by how many people vote from a given precinct in a year, which does change, unless we're misunderstanding.
So what the elections team has done is they've taken how many voters are currently registered in that area, and then once if the dorms were to be taken out of that ward, and put into the other, that's where the 38 voters come from. It's based off from the current registered voters in that area.
Thank you.
I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it gets to the question of whether or not that's a set number, like are there residences? And let's be clear, what we're really talking about, as has been pointed out, are the number of registered voters at a given moment on fraternity sorority row. Councilmember Harrington, thank you for waiting.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to give speaking a shot. This may go poorly. Ruby may have other ideas. So I would say to the Vice Mayor's point that the number of people could go up. I think to her second point about maybe a decline in sorority and fraternity membership, I think it could also go down into a much less favorable situation for those voters. I mean, you could envision in the same hypothetical that we have 15 voters in that block. So I would say that is a notable concern. And then for just the sake of saying it, I continue to think that splitting West Laramie and the West Side is not in the best interest of the residents out there. So I think maybe I'll just leave it at that. And I would support a postponement, but thanks, Mayor. I got through it. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Point well made and understood, Councilmember Harrington. Ruby didn't seem to have any objections. Of course, neither do we. Other discussion about this? Do we want to see if there's input from meeting attendees from the public? Okay. Seems like we do. Well, we'll check and see. I'd like to make a comment too that one thing that's been, as I'm waiting for people, one thing that's been so frustrating about this is the amount of input on this issue has been lacking, in my opinion. We've had a lot of discussion about concerns about West Laramie, but a lot of it, I'm going to say, from people that don't live in that area. In fact, most of the objections that I've seen about the West Laramie issue have been from people that live in other areas. Now, that's okay. Anybody can make any comment about City of Laramie policy they like, but I think that kind of speaks to the issue of, do we look at things holistically as a city, or do we start to say, what are particular concerns of the neighborhood? I don't know. I'm not making a judgment about that. Council, I don't see any hands coming up to add anything for the council on this discussion. I do see a hand up now. I was hoping I would. I'd like to recognize Dr. Ipina. Lynn Ipina, let's let her into the room. Thank you. Appreciate your willingness to add some comment here. And when I see you, there you are. Thank you, and you have the floor.
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, I wanted to ask questions. Why, for example, Representative Harrington, what is it that you think dividing West Laramie does to their representation? The League of Women Voters, we were present on that work session. Actually, we were most of the people present on the work session. And I remember being convinced that mixing the different parts of the town was going to bring more people into, but more people would be concerned about West Laramie since they would be part of West Laramie. Does that not ring true as a reason for splitting West Laramie or letting others into West Laramie?
So Dr. Ipina, typically we don't do a back and forth question and answer during public comment. And that's nothing to do with the nature of your question or anything to that effect. So I guess I would say, I'm not going to open that up for a direct question and answer, but I think that question has been heard. And I'm sure that council members will note that and can get back to you or perhaps have a one-on-one discussion with you to answer that question. And I'd encourage you to, if you have more questions, to go ahead and ask them now, but I don't think we'll get into a back and forth.
No,
is that reasonable?
Yeah, that's more than reasonable. And the other thing I was going to comment on those 38 people, I would think that it's sort of unlikely that 38 would grow to over 200. Say for the next election. Now, you might just be making a predictable mistake in thinking that somehow that number just changes and shouldn't be a concern. All right, with that, I'll say goodbye.
Very much appreciate your willingness to make some comments and weigh in on this issue. And we'll hold public comment open to see if anybody else would like to follow suit, because these are the discussions we need to be having so that the council can hear that input. Seeing none for the time being, well, I might, council, without objection, I may check back one more time before we go to a vote on whatever we're going to do. But let's get back to discussion, and I'm going to call on Councilmember O'Doherty.
I was just wondering if councilors would consider the Proposition 3.2 as, but I'm pretty sure, having spoken to you, that there's no support for that. So I'm just wondering, can we get it into the public record so that people could weigh in if we have a postponement? It's now on our agenda, so people could look at it, right? It's on tonight's agenda. So I would ask the council to at least let us, ask the clerk's office to clean up that little sliver. It's a standalone precinct, and it's a little island. It's a mess. I never should have drawn it. We were trying to be clever, and it was a bad idea. So I was hoping that if
City Clerk, can we have this map? Can we have this map displayed? Sorry to interrupt, Councilmember O'Doherty. Please continue. I just thought it might be useful to have the map up.
I was thinking a better map might be, yeah. So, yeah. So this is one that I would like to propose, and I don't know if I should make an amendment so you all can vote it down, or I'm not sure what to do. So maybe Councilor Gabriel has more chutzpah than me.
Council, we have a council member that wants some direction from the rest of us as to whether or not we want to have a discussion about an amendment to replace the map on the motion as it stands. And if they want to do that tonight, then we can postpone, have feedback, and then if we decide to postpone, we have a period for feedback, and then we can vote on this amended map, or if we just want, or another option would be for us to postpone and then revisit the current map that we've adopted, or neither of those and just go forward with third reading. That's also an option, as amended or as it stands, right? Everybody understands that, but I guess we should probably go through all the possibilities that are available to the council tonight. Got some other folks waiting in the queue. It's all right. This is a big deal, and it's always going to be a complicated discussion. So the time that we're giving to it, I think, should just be accepted as necessary. Councilmember Somerville, I believe. Councilmember Cumby, I had Councilmember Somerville up next, so I'll go to her and then to you. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor, not Mary, Mayor. To the specifically to the Councilmember O'Doherty's point, I was actually kind of expecting and wondering if we're going to postpone this potentially 2 weeks, assuming that that motion passes. Since the clerk has raised some concerns, if we can take this map and the 1B, and if there's anything else that needs to be cleaned up, and bring them both back to council in a couple of weeks. When we bring that back, that seems like it would give some time. This map's out in the public now, since it's posted on the agenda, which I appreciate. And again, I just want to thank Councilor O'Doherty for all of her work. I know that she's being hard on herself right now, but this is highly technical. It's difficult work, and she's dedicated an amazing amount of time, as you stated, Mayor, last week, to working on maps that she's not even that fond of. So I appreciate that. But that would be my thought, is if we could just bring them both back with any other corrections or after consultations with the city and the county clerks.
Thank you, Councilmember Somerville. I'd like to point something out. We don't have staff with dedicated time available for map drawing. This is really a council process of coming up with these maps as it stands. It's the council that draws the maps or adopts the maps, whoever draws them, and we go to whatever sources we find. We're certainly willing, and I think we've shown to be willing to take input. You know, we've had the county clerk's office come up with some maps, and we've leaned on Councilmember O'Doherty's abilities with this, because she's done it in a variety of capacities professionally and so forth. So that's why we've asked her. Councilmember Schuster, I saw you had a hand up. I'm going to go to you after Councilmember Cumby. Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd just like to say that I do support the postpone and continue working on it during the next 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Cumby. Councilmember Schuster, thanks for waiting.
Thank you very much. I looked at the other map, and I finally came into where I would support it, because it had growth for every area. We know that Laramie's going to grow. One of the biggest things is we have water. There are counties in the United States that have quit allowing building permits because they cannot guarantee water. Laramie's probably going to have a little bit of a growth spurt. The current map that we have right now, not bringing in the new map, has growth potential for every single ward. And that's something I like. The map that has been brought up tonight does not have that equal growth pattern for every single ward. I will look at it during our 2-week period, try to see what I think of it, but being it sprung on us tonight, I am not a fan or a favor of it, because it does not allow the 3 wards to grow equally at all, not even close. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. And Council, this is why we wanted to just bring this on the floor, to sort of discuss those 2 things at once, so that we didn't go one at a time. And I think we're getting a picture here from what council members are comfortable with. Council, what I'm hearing is that a postponement has support, or it appears to have sufficient support, but amendments in terms of maps, that seems to be something we might want to wait on. I would like the council to consider allowing these map options to be made available as potential amendments to the public, as attachments as we go through this 2-week period. I don't know that there's any rule or any reason we couldn't do that, City Clerk. Okay, but the motion that would be postponed tonight would still include the old map, but I think as a result of this discussion, there would be some understanding, and I imagine that it would be reported that there are other maps that could be under consideration. Other discussion? Yeah, City Attorney, thank you. Oh, City Attorney, we've got to get your mic on. Sorry.
Forgot what I was going to say now. No, I wanted to puzzle through with you the logistics of this.
Please.
Meaning we have now an ordinance with a verbal description of the map that you approved last time, right? And it takes a while, though we're getting better at it, for the city clerk, me, Holly, Sean Kraft, our GSI staff, to when you tell us, here's the map we want, it takes, let's say, a week, probably, 1 week, to put a verbal description in an ordinance for you to pass. So I just want you to be aware of that. We can work with it. Absolutely, we'll do whatever you want. But let's say we just postponed today, and it comes before the council on April 5, and there's another map, right? However, these are tweaked or whatever you come up with, it's fine. But on April 5th, you will not have in front of you, that does not automatically translate into a written ordinance that outlines that map in writing, which is a big pain in the neck, actually. But we're like I said, we're getting better at it. So I just want you to throw that into your thought process.
City Attorney, do you have some suggestions about how the council can move forward in a way that makes this a little less burdensome for staff?
And I don't want to make
it's okay. We understand.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a burden on staff. We'll do whatever you want, and we, as you just saw, we can turn something around in a week. And I don't want to try to interfere with your process of tweaking maps and working on maps. But just understand, if you work on a variety of maps over the next couple of weeks, when you choose one on April 5, it's going to take until you have another special meeting, April 12th, for us to put that into words for you to pass. We're happy to do it. And City Clerk, you can weigh in certainly if you have any different thoughts.
City Clerk, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Mayor. I was kind of thinking similarly along the lines with City Attorney. If the council were to consider additional maps, my thought was that maybe there's, I don't know how long our March 29th work session topic will take, but maybe an additional work session at the end of that work session to discuss different maps, if that's what the direction the council's wanting to go. That way, the city attorney's office and our office have the time that we need to prepare the ordinance to come before you on April 5th. To kind of keep that process moving forward.
Thank you, City Clerk. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, Mayor.
I have a question for you and the City Attorney, which is that I think the council needs to also consider that regardless of what we do, there's another piece here where whatever's approved by the council has to be delivered, I think, to the county for the clerk's offices, their elections department over there to figure out what precincts are going to be. And then that also has to go through a process with the county commissioners to adopt those precincts. And there's a time consideration to that as well. I think there is a deadline for that so that the ballots can be prepared in time for the filing and the primaries. Is that also a consideration? I believe it is.
Mayor, that is correct. The county clerk is trying to get this on the county commissioner's agenda no later than the May first meeting in May. But in order to do that, they have to have sufficient time to prepare notices and publish to the public for 2 weeks before it gets to the county commissioners for vote. So they do have some processes that they need to go through in advance of their meeting.
So I think, Council, the upshot of this, given those concerns that we've heard about regarding the calendar, is that the city clerk's suggestion about this being revisited in a week for the adoption of any possible amendments is probably advisable, because then it gives a time period for an amended ordinance for the staff to have time to get that worked up so that we can pass that at a meeting in early April, and the clerk's office has at least some time to work with it before the first county commissioners meeting in May.
Mayor, could I just ask if the city attorney agrees with that?
Yeah, I'm interested as well.
I'm interested too, so I'm thinking. Yes, I mean, and I think we could loop the county clerk into this conversation, but certainly if a map was agreed upon in a special meeting next week, then we could put that map into words to have an ordinance ready for you on April 5th. But I'd be interested in what the county clerk, absolutely needs when.
Yeah, I think the entire council is interested in that, and I see they've joined us, and we thank them for being here with us yet again as we discuss this topic. We know you didn't have anything better to do on Tuesday night, so we'd like to hear from the county clerk's office on this timeline question and see if you guys can help us a little bit.
Honorable Mayor, thank you so much for the opportunity to provide some information to you tonight. We did have this discussion earlier today and indicated to Clerk Bartholomew that with the timeline that she's working with, it will align with the time that we need. Certainly, we're on hold right now pending what the governor will do, whether he'll sign the redistricting bill or whether it goes into law on Saturday, March 26th. And so we will continue to work along our statutory timeline so that we meet the statutory requirements on our end, but certainly do agree that what the city clerk is proposing will work with us.
All right. Thank you. And I think we needed to hear that, because what that says to me is if we're going to have a meeting where we adopt a new map through an amendment, that probably does need to happen at a special meeting on March 29th, so that we're not giving people impossible timelines. City Attorney, I'm reluctant to ask this question, but I feel like I need to, which is that if the governor signs into law or it goes into law without his signature, the current legislative maps, if someone were to challenge those maps in court right away, relatively quickly, let's say a week or so within the process of that, does that put a halt at least until the first opportunity for a judge to rule on that, on those maps going into effect?
I've thought of that, and I don't know the answer.
Okay.
The county clerk may have some insight, because the county clerks association must be on pins and needles on that very topic. So if I could ask a question, Jackie, have the county clerks had a chance to think through the possibilities?
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. Mr. Southerns, in response to your question, we're all on pins and needles right now, awaiting to see what's going to happen. I did speak with one of my colleagues, and of course, we're just at a standstill, and we're trying to work through so that we meet our statutory obligations. And so we hate to wait till the 11th hour, but right now we don't have any direction. So we're doing the best that we can with what we have.
County Clerk, if I could follow up a little bit on the city attorney's question, is what I'm wondering is if somebody let's say the current maps go into effect with the governor's signature or with law, does that halt those until a court renders a decision? And I'll accept that maybe we just don't know. But it seems like that's another. I see the city attorney's put a hand up. Maybe he wants to join us on this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try again, Mayor. I mean, it's unpredictable because the nature of the lawsuit and how quickly it would move is unpredictable.
All right.
There will be forum shopping, and there are various ways to craft that lawsuit, and then there's various probabilities of getting into court within 48 hours, perhaps, or getting into court in 4 weeks. 48 hours would be preferable for the county clerks and preferable for our constituents. But I just feel it's impossible to answer because it depends.
So it's so much of a variable that even though we might like to consider it, we really can't because there's no way to guess until papers are filed, is what I'm hearing. So that's fair enough. We probably shouldn't even bring it in. We'll deal with it as need be, I guess. All right. I just wanted to get a little bit of information about that. I think I understand. We really don't know. We're not going to know. It's going to depend on the nature of whatever is filed if somebody sues. Okay. Councilmember O'Doherty. You've been waiting patiently. Yeah.
So my question is it the way the ward maps were designed, or when we became this ward system, does it say we shall change the wards every 10 years, or do we have the freedom to change it if this population moves from the dorms? And then my other question is, would maybe the clerk can fill us in on the map they were trying to amend 1B to make it not have that pocket, and if they have any ideas about that, then.
Councilmember O'Doherty, I want to clarify something. Are you asking, with respect to the dorms, you're asking, I think, if the council can, in the middle of a 10-year period, adjust city council ward boundaries, and is there anything that prevents us from doing that? Is that your question? And I see it in nodding heads. I think that sounds like a question for the city attorney, but we'd welcome any input from the county clerk as well. City attorney, do you need a minute maybe to look into that one, or do you have something ready to go?
I absolutely need a minute to look into that one, but my guess is, my informed guess is that the answer is no. Our population and the population of our wards changes daily, right? And the attacks on trying to amend our wards just, every 6 months because we feel like, 200 people moved in over by the high school or something. The answer might be a flat no, because I've never looked at this, right? But even if it's not a flat no, I think it would be dangerous and wrong to even try it. So,
all right.
Well, barring some sort of annexation of some large population that doesn't actually exist out there. But
thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. Follow up on that, I suppose.
The way the legislature handles this is they have the map software spit out census blocks. The the changes that I think were proposed, that I would propose, since nobody likes my three, would be to adjust just that, take the dorms out, move them back into Ward 3, and then move Ward 2 to the east. And I think that would make it a cleaner map as far as precincts, and would be not hard to change the description. But I was wondering, the legislature just publishes census blocks and a picture, but we have to put, I mean, I like having streets describing, I think that, but I don't think we'd have to change many streets description with this proposal.
I think I'm a little lost here. Are you still speaking to a mid-decade adjustment process, Councilmember O'Doherty?
I was just thinking, if something as unusual as the largest census block suddenly going empty would be more significant than 200 people moving here or there. So if it's unconstitutional to have a precinct that has fewer than 200 voters, I'm wondering, do we have an option when that happens, if the dorm shut down, to have in 2 or 4 years to have a meeting so that we are not stranding voters and losing the privacy of the ballot?
I think I'd like to give hit the pause button on this line of questioning, because I think there's a couple of important concerns in 2 different directions that have been raised by the council member and the city attorney. And I don't know that without adequate time, we're really going to get to the bottom of that, because I think those are two interesting concerns. So I'd like to pause that discussion now and revisit it. I had some hands up, but I saw them go down, so perhaps everybody's all right for that portion. Okay, council members, I think where we've landed is that there's sufficient support to postpone. I think the postponement date needs to follow the city clerk's advice for the 29th. Councilmember Gabriel, I want to give you an opportunity. Go ahead.
I was just going to move the motion if we're ready.
Councilmember Somerville, I see you directing me to look somewhere, but I don't know where it is.
Sorry, of course, your Hollywood squares are not the same as mine. The county clerk has her hand up.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, county clerk.
Mayor Weaver, just in our discussion here, looking back at the proposed 1B map, we think that maybe we have some ideas that maybe will fix 13.2 that's an issue. Certainly we want to work with members of the council, your team. I know this is how important this is. I'm fortunate that I have some very knowledgeable and great resources here that are willing to take the time to allow us to work with anyone who wants to meet with us. The sooner the better, for all purposes, for everyone. And so I just want to extend that offer that we're here and available, and if that is accepted, I would be happy to coordinate with the city clerk and let whoever has an interest in coming to see what we've just discussed and looking at other potential ideas for consideration to stay with the proposal 1B map. We can all get together and review it.
Thank you for that. And of course, we have nothing to say but thank you for that, and we've really appreciated how you've worked with us this entire time. It's such a hard process because folks have so many different things that they have as concerns. Some folks have one set of concerns that is at the top of mind that they think should drive the process, and other folks have a different set, and they're all valid. I would just ask this: whatever map proposals that you come up with, I think that's good. I just think they should be circulated to all the council members before the date of the 29th. That's the only thing, and I'm sure they would be, but just get them when you have one. And I think we'd accept anything from your office, whoever collaborates with you or not. Just make sure that they're circulated out to the city clerk and the rest of the council, so that folks have had a chance to look at them before the 29th. But I think your suggestion sounds great. And I don't know, I'm not sure that Council Members O'Doherty's crystal ball about there being zero support for the map that we saw earlier tonight is accurate. But we need to get them all, and we need to get a little bit of time to look at them before the meeting that I think we're going to postpone to on the 29th. But I really appreciate your comments and that continued commitment to working with us. I know that we all wish that this was an easier process. It's not. It's extremely hard. And it's the first time that it's been done since the adoption of the 3 ward members in 3 wards. So I guess we were foolish to think it wouldn't be kind of a bumpy road, if any of us thought that. So thanks again. I really appreciate your help. We all do. Council, I think we were going to, and thank you, Councilmember Somerville, for helping me, recognize speakers that we need to. I think we were going to move to Councilmember Gabriel, who I believe has a motion pending for postponement, which is where we've landed here. Councilmember Gabriel.
Oh, you bet. Thank you. I move to postpone original ordinance number 2042 to March 29th of 22.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second, and Council, seeing as how we've had a couple of opportunities for public comment, I think we'll go to the vote, but I'm going to check with the city clerk.
Mayor, if I could just confirm with the council that this will be a 6 o'clock start time for the public.
6 o'clock start time. No objections.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
We're out of time as it is, right? So we'll start. And we've had some public comment to the council on this discussion. So we'll hold that now. And of course, we encourage members of the public that are interested in this to reach out to us either as individual council members or to email the whole council at cityoflaramie.org. All right. Let's have a roll call vote, City Clerk.
Cumby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schmeckel.
Yes.
Schuster.
No.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
No.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 7 yeses and 2 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. Thank you, Council. That motion carries. I'll thank the County Clerk's Office folks for being with us again. We really, I don't know, I've probably said it too much, but really, it's really important. And we know it's not your regular schedule, so we do thank you. That takes us to adjournment of the special meeting, and we're about 15 minutes, about 7:15, so I think we should just keep going, Council, and get into the next item, which is a motion to adjourn, I suppose, so that we're procedurally correct. Councilmember Schuster.
I move the council adjourn the special meeting, go back to our work session.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. We're adjourned. I'd like to now open this work session for March 22nd, 2022, which will be a presentation regarding the audit that was completed for the city, and begin that now.
I don't know.
I'm not yet. City Clerk.
Mayor, if we could have public comment to begin the work session, and then Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities, Katie Harmon is our representative here for the presentation.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I skipped the part where we need to go to the annual update about the Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities. That isn't, that's more a problem of the mayor not being able to read and look at all the screens correctly. I'm sorry, Ms. Harmon, about that. Let's quickly go to public comment on items that aren't related to the work session and see if we have any. Seeing none, we'll now go. And again, I apologize, council members and others. I just went too far down the agenda. So, Katie Harmon, welcome. You have the floor to begin this portion of the work session. We're really glad to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, council members. I'm excited to be here and share a little bit about what the commission has worked on last year, some of our exciting goals for the upcoming year. Nancy, do you have that PowerPoint? We have yes, there it is. That I'll kind of follow along with as I share some of the things that we've been doing. So again, my name's Katie Harmon. I'm the chair of the Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities, and just here to share, like I said, a little bit about the things that we've been working on and maybe some things that council could even help us with. Nancy, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. Thank you. So this goes over our purpose per our bylaws that I'll just read through real quickly before diving into some of the things that we've been working on. So our purpose as a commission is to review accessibility and other related issues of individuals with a disability in the general community, discuss and make recommendations on how such issues might be resolved, to disseminate information to the public to promote awareness of multiple advantages of accessibility of structures, programs, employment practices, and services for individuals with a disability, to serve as a grievance board concerning alleged city structural or program discrimination whenever a hearing is provided for by law according to the municipal code regarding such grievances, to work with the city council or designee to develop a self-evaluation study to determine any physical barriers, problems with delivery of services, employment practices, and or other activities and programs offered by the city, to work with the city council or designee to develop a transition plan for any concerns identified under the evaluation study or the grievance procedures. The plan shall call for all non-structural concerns to be corrected within 1 year and all structural concerns to be corrected within 3 years or sooner if required by applicable law, to act as an advisory capacity to the city council on all matters of city policy respecting persons who have a disability, to advise and assist the city administration and city council in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act and other applicable laws. So kind of what that boils down to in non-bylaw jargon is that myself and the other commission members have the immense privilege of getting to rub shoulders with so many wonderful community members who have disabilities themselves, family members or caregivers of individuals with disabilities, people who work with those with disabilities, and get to kind of not only promote awareness of the disability community, but also figure out accessibility challenges that might exist in our community and address those as best we can. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's a little bit of a review of what we were able to do in 2021. As you can imagine, the COVID-19 pandemic uniquely affected individuals with disabilities and thereby also kind of our commission. We've been, of course, meeting over Zoom since the pandemic began. But I'm really proud of all the work and all that we were able to accomplish and kind of the outreach we were still able to have despite doing a lot of things virtually. So last year in 2021, March, we recognized as Disability Awareness Month, which we've done in past years before as well. That recognition in March kind of included several different elements. One was we were able as a commission to compile our Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities resource list. This includes some different books, different movies and TV shows, and even like Instagram accounts that people can follow and look up that promote disability awareness. So most of the books are by authors with disabilities, sharing about the lived experience of individuals with disabilities. Some of the TV shows and movies have disabled actors in them or directed by individuals who have disabilities. So kind of the goal of that resource list kind of was centered on the pandemic, being a way for people from the safety of their home, maybe who are in isolation, to still kind of participate and be aware of the disability community, just the disability rights movement, without being able to maybe do things in person. But we found that list to be really helpful just as a resource to share with the community in general, regardless of the pandemic. Last month in March, we were also able to speak to the librarians in Albany County school districts and encourage them as they were able to set up disability-centered book displays for the month of March. If you've been in any of the schools, they'll often have a themed display there kind of in the center of the library, maybe centered on holidays during the holiday season. So we encouraged them as they were able to set up book displays centered on disability for the month of March. So that was really great. We've had a goal to kind of reach as many community members as possible. So getting into, kind of some of these schools was a great way to reach young members of the community and expose kids at an early age to the disability community. Also, for the first time last year, we were able to participate in Pride Fest, which was wonderful. We know that individuals that identify as LGBTQIA+, there's some intersectionality with the disability community. Individuals who identify as LGBTQIA+, are more likely to also identify as having a disability. So this is definitely, a portion of the community that we want to make sure they know who we are, what we do, that we're there as a resource for them. So we were able to have a table at Pride Fest with our resource list and some other information, pamphlets and stuff that might be helpful to people. We also were able to have our accessibility obstacle course there at Pride Fest for people to get to experience. For those of you who might not have seen that obstacle course before, it's kind of a set of different wooden obstacles. There's like a wooden door frame with a door in it. There's like a gravel pit. There's several kind of wooden bumpy structures that maybe mimic the way that a sidewalk curb would be. And then we have some wheelchairs, crutches, walkers, different mobility devices available for people who come to the obstacle course to be able to use as they go through this course and kind of get just a little bit of a taste of what it's like to navigate terrain or navigate a community that hasn't been built in an accessible way, to kind of just for a minute step into the shoes of someone with a disability and see what that's like. We've had this is the first time we've been able to use the obstacle course since the pandemic began. And before that, and then also now, we've had great feedback on that obstacle course. And I feel like kids as well as adults come away having such a greater understanding and appreciation for why accessibility is so important and why legislation like the ADA is so important. So that was a huge hit at Pride Fest. And then towards the end of the year in October, we were able to recognize Disability Employment Month with a proclamation that kind of honored some businesses in Laramie that have gone above and beyond either like hiring individuals with disabilities or making their buildings more accessible. Nancy, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So some of our goals for 2022, some of these mirror, we definitely want to repeat a lot of the awesome things that we did last year, but also incorporate some new things as well. So again, in March this month, we're honoring Disability Awareness Month. Those goals, kind of the things we did last year, we've expanded upon in some ways. So not only were we able, again, to contact some of those librarians at ACSD1 schools, and we heard back from more that sounded like they were able to participate this year than last year, so that was exciting. We also were able to get book displays up at the Albany County Public Library, as well as at Co-Library at the university. So again, with a goal to kind of reach as many community members as possible, it was awesome to see the reach that those libraries on their own will have. We also, as a commission, were able to draft up a letter to local businesses regarding COVID-19's unique impact on individuals with disabilities. This was important to us. The members of our commission are so wonderful. We have so many broad perspectives, and like I said, the pandemic has impacted each of us and, on a larger scale, all individuals with disabilities in a host of different ways. So this letter kind of was a call to local businesses to remember the people they might be serving who have disabilities, and that their needs related to COVID might be unique based on their disability. Kind of just a call to remember to be empathetic and understanding, and to keep in mind that individuals with disabilities might have unique needs as it relates to COVID. We also have a goal this upcoming year to increase our Facebook presence. The Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities has a Facebook page, but it's kind of underutilized. We don't use it for a lot of things. So we have a goal this year to be a little more active on our Facebook page, so the public, maybe that access the online space more can know when our meetings are, when we're going to be involved in things like Pride Fest, maybe just other resources about things going on in the disability community that we can share there. Again, we hope to be involved in Pride Fest 2022. So we will be there with our table and our obstacle course. We also hope to be at Freedom Has a Birthday this year, assuming that is, going to be hosted as it had been prior to the pandemic. We also have a wonderful new commission member who's a member of the deaf community on the commission. And we now also will be marking September as Deaf Awareness Month, or kind of to be decided, but we're definitely going to have some sort of activities to promote Deaf Awareness Month. And then again, towards the end of the year, we'll be doing the Disability Employment Proclamation. Again, recognizing businesses who have prioritized the employment of individuals with disabilities. And then kind of one of our last things that's been kind of an ongoing concern that we've heard from the community is issues with snow removal and accessibility. So, I mean, as you can imagine, anyone would struggle, you know, to navigate a sidewalk that maybe hadn't been scraped, you know, the way it should after a heavy snowfall. But especially someone who might be navigating a sidewalk in a wheelchair or, you know, with crutches or a guide dog. This, you know, especially impacts individuals with disabilities. I think that was one of our questions maybe for council tonight is when we receive complaints like that, it's brought to our attention as a commission, what's the best way we can address that problem? Who can we bring that to maybe in the city to kind of make snow removal and accessibility a priority? Next slide, please. I think that's kind of it on our end. Super excited with all that we've done and all that we plan to do. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It was really great to hear about all of that.
Thank you.
I don't know that in my time on the council that we've had that type of an annual report from the Disabilities Commission before. So I think that was great.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
Really good for us to be able to hear those things. And yes, of course, we're feeling pretty good about what we've just seen there. And I think that speaks to your volunteer commitment for us. I'd like to mention it's a volunteer commitment with the city of Laramie to run our and chair our Disabilities Commission. So there's not going to be enough that we can say about thanking you for that.
Oh, thanks so much. Happy to do it.
Well, we're more than happy to have you do it. Do we have some questions? I have one or two, but I want to give other people. Yes, Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Nice job, Katie. Excellent presentation. And the last thing that you talked about has been an issue with me on accessibility, especially with people parking in the street and trying to get onto the sidewalk, snow removal, lack thereof. And in fact, Councilmember O'Doherty and I talked about this, and I called the person that was responsible for the snow removal and pushing it right in to the lane that people would, in wheelchairs, try to get on to a sidewalk. And I don't know, I was just curious if you've heard a lot of complaints about that. And I think we need to find out who we need to go to and really get that message out to people that accessibility to sidewalks and not putting it right in the way when you push it off into the curb for people to get in and out from the sidewalk, especially for people with disabilities, I think is so important, and we need to really emphasize that to people.
Absolutely. And, you know, I don't know that we've had any specific complaints with snow being put into the curb cutouts where an individual who maybe is a wheelchair user would get up onto the sidewalk. More in general, it sounds like, you know, certain intersections maybe that are heavily used, but that the snow either isn't removed or is piled up in the wrong place. Maybe that's even what people mean by the wrong place. We've just gotten reports there's certain areas of town that people even have specifically said seem to be just problematic. Whether it's just no removal at all, it's kind of not getting done, or it's just being put in a pile in a place that really is detrimental. So, yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for the Disabilities Commission Chair? Councilmember O'Doherty.
Good to see you, Ms.
You too.
Harmon. So maybe if your social media awareness for the sidewalk issue would be a good way for us. We just have trouble spreading the word.
Right.
And so it sounds like you already are on that, and that's great. And then I was just wondering if the city manager can inform us about what the process should be. So when somebody complains about, like, what issue, where does it go? Thank you.
Councilmember Doherty, is that a question for the city manager's office? All right.
Yes.
We'll give the city manager a minute because we have not badgered the city manager with any questions so far this meeting. So,
Mayor, this is Janine. If I could clarify the question, Councilor Doherty, was the question where would a complaint be sort of registered with the city if there was concern about disabled access and snow removal?
Yes.
So there's a whole host of ways that folks can do that. Oftentimes we just simply receive an email to myself or to other members of staff, notably in the street department perhaps, and the Parks and Recreation Division, who work to clear street adjacent to our publicly owned parks. There is also on the City of Laramie's website front page, there's an icon that says report a concern that you can click on, and that'll generate an email form that can be sent into the city, and the user can check various departments of the city to whom that complaint would go. People pick up the phone anytime, 721-5220, I think is our main line at City Hall, and can be directed to the relevant department, or they can call the city manager's office at 721-5226. And I'd say those are the primary ways. We also occasionally field walk-in traffic and conversations with folks as well if they want to report an area that's concerning to them.
I would add that emailing your city council members certainly is an option, but it's much quicker to follow one of the options that you just heard because you never know when people are going to check their email or be available. I mean, certainly you can do that, and I would never discourage people to, but they're much likely to get a faster response using one of the pathways that was just covered. Ms. Harmon, I see you've got a hand up. Oh, sound.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. This question might be for the city manager. So it seems like quite a few community members bring those concerns to the commission, which we're of course happy to hear. Would you recommend us as commission members, all of those ways you just mentioned, are those the best ways for us as commission members to then kind of address these issues?
Thanks, Katie. That's a great question. So just differentiating a little bit, as Councilor Gabriel, I think, touched on, the problem can oftentimes be one where folks are not removing snow from their sidewalks as they're required to. The removal of snow in sidewalks, curb gutter is the property owner's responsibility. So sometimes it's just a public education issue. And I can see that really being a place where the Disabilities Commission could partner with the city and really play a valuable role to help residents understand that shoveling that sidewalk is important for a whole host of reasons, but probably the last one that people think about is disabled access, right? So that would be a cool partnership. But more directly to your question, if you at the Disabilities Commission receive concerns or questions about, what the law does require, doesn't require, does or does not require, or about where the city may not be adequately performing maintenance or snow removal, then absolutely you can send that to myself or to the Public Works Director, or both of us, frankly.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you, City Manager. Councilmember Cumby.
I just wanted to say thank you to Katie. And as it was a very good presentation, and I really appreciate you doing that. And as liaison to the commission, I just want to acknowledge what an enthusiastic and active group we have right now. We have filled our commission with even 2 more extraordinary people, and I look forward to some good things to come. And so thank you so much, Katie, and thank you, Council, for your support.
Thank you, Sharon. It's been great working with you.
Yes, Council, in a recent council action, we appointed, I don't know if either of them were reappointments. It's been a while since I've been able to attend a meeting, but we appointed, were those new members or reappointments, Chair Harmon?
New members.
New members. Okay, good. Yes, I saw that, and we had signed those appointments, and all of our volunteer board members, yes, the city wouldn't be able to really function appropriately and respond to these kinds of concerns if we didn't have folks that were willing to step up and fill these positions. And the council would be even probably more pressed for the time and space available to address these issues if we didn't have these volunteer commissions to meet and then channel these issues, come to meetings like this, ask those questions about how to improve the situation. So our thanks. Other questions for our guests tonight about Disabilities Commission topics or any of the information that was presented? See if there's any, let me see if there's any public feedback about this while we still have you here, Katie, just to see if there's somebody that might want to ask a question or something like that that you might be in a better position to answer. Doesn't look like it, but we like to check. Thanks again for being here, and we look forward to more information and more activities to hear about.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. Thank you. We appreciate you. All right, council. Why don't we move to the next item on our work session? It's an important item, and that's the audit presentation on the ACFR review. And we've got our finance director, Wade, here with us. I believe that she had communicated a little bit of a preview for this item to the council just a little bit earlier. I see that we have Abby Hagerman with us as well, and we appreciate your attendance, Ms. Hagerman. And Director Wade, it's over to you. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. I have the pleasure of first introducing Tax and Assurance Director, Abby Hagerman. She is going to be presenting the results of the fiscal year 2021 audit. After she finishes her presentation, I will move on to an overview of our audited annual report. And Abby, I'll turn it over to you.
Excuse me. Great. Thank you. Hello and welcome, everyone. Mayor Weaver, members of City Council, thank you so much for having me this evening. Thank you, Jen, for the nice introduction. Of course, every single year we talk about the audit, and because the city is a governmental entity, it's required by state statute to obtain a financial statement audit each year. In addition to that financial statement audit, because you are a governmental entity, you're subject to some additional auditing requirements that are associated with compliance surrounding the city's internal controls over financial reporting. The last piece that occurs inside of this audit is an audit of compliance with your federal programming. Some of you have heard of it. You might have heard way back in the day, the A133 or the single audit or uniform guidance. That's the final piece of that. That's where we're looking at the compliance with the laws and regulations associated with grant funding that's been received. That piece I won't speak directly to this evening as we're working to complete the final pieces of that single audit. So I'll be discussing tonight specifically the financial statement audit. So like I said, we've substantially completed it. It's for the year ended June 30th, 2021. Our audit is conducted in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. And it's our responsibility to communicate to you, who are considered to be those charged with governance, the results of those audits. Communication comes directly to you guys as the city council, because oftentimes we get, as auditors, we're down in the trenches and we talk with the Department of Finance day in and day out throughout the audit process. But we're hired by the city council to conduct and ensure we communicate that information with you. So I'll be communicating the results of the audit this evening. The objective of an audit, some people think, is to find fraud. And while, yes, if something were to come to light and that nature, we would discuss it. But really the point of an audit is to obtain reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, that the financial statements that are presented are free from material misstatements. It has to be reasonable assurance, not absolute. Otherwise, I would sit next to Jennifer Wade and her team day in and day out and look at every single transaction that they do, right? So instead, we perform a risk-based approach to be able to provide that reasonable assurance to you. The scope of our work is planned, like I mentioned, on a risk-based approach. If there are, financial statement areas that are inherently more complex or difficult, or perhaps the Government Accounting Standards Board has decided they want to implement a new reporting policy of some kind, we might raise additional procedures associated with those areas. The good news is that based on the results of what we did, we were able to issue an unmodified opinion. An unmodified opinion is the best opinion that you can receive, and it means that we were able to obtain that reasonable assurance that those financial statements are free of material misstatement. We issued that report on January 26, 2022. Management's cooperation, like every other year that we've been involved with all of you, has been wonderful. We were granted full access to all of the information that we need to be able to obtain the audit evidence to issue that unmodified audit opinion. So we thank them, for being patient and for always being able to get us the information that we need. Accounting practices often change, and I feel like the Governmental Accounting Standards Board sometimes likes to sit around and make things more difficult all the time and come up with new ideas. So something that was new to the fiscal year 21 audit was the implementation of what's called the GASB Statement number 84. This was specifically in regard to fiduciary activities and the way that they're to be presented on the face of the financial statements. There's a specific footnote that's been called to the attention. Jen will probably talk about those changes or implementations of policy when you review that ACFR. But that was really the only major change that happened this year from a nuts and bolts perspective associated with the financial statements. Of course, what makes financial statements perhaps more difficult is if an area includes a lot of estimates. Estimates that are identified for the city of Laramie, of course, is the allowance for uncollectible accounts. This could be, obviously customer accounts receivables inside of the utility billing, but it could be something for accounts receivable from granting agencies, and if there needs to be any allowance for any of those types of things. Net pension liability is another big area. We never know exactly where Wyoming retirement sits. And is it overfunded? Is it underfunded? If it's underfunded, how much of that is, associated with the city of Laramie's proportionate share? And then the other piece that involves heavy accounting estimates is the city's self-insured health insurance fund. There's something in that called the incurred but not reported liability that involves actuarial services and estimates. The city does contract with third-party consultants to handle those matters. And we'll talk about that a little further in the presentation. Good things to report is that we oftentimes have to communicate to our audit clients that they have uncorrected misstatements or corrected misstatements to be made. Those sound like really harsh and terrible words, but it's just a part of the audit process to ensure that everything is in conformity with the reporting requirements that are necessary. We did not have any uncorrected misstatements inside of the city, which is what we typically see, right? They're everything, you have a nice, sophisticated, highly educated finance department that is capable of producing the financial statements to receive that certificate of excellence from the GFOA for their annual submission. Corrected misstatements occur every year inside of audits. Where there are items that need to be fixed. Maybe it's a new accounting pronouncement, so on and so forth. So we had no concerns regarding those matters there. I touched briefly that we gave an opinion, right, over the financial statements themselves. Then because you're a governmental entity, we have to look at the internal controls over financial reporting. Excuse me. There are three types of deficiencies that could be communicated to those charged with governance when we talk about doing this type of internal control testing. There's a control deficiency, that's the lowest level, and that's what exists if maybe the design or the operation of a control didn't allow management in the normal course of their functions to prevent or detect a misstatement on a timely basis. The next step up from that is a significant deficiency. And that could be one deficiency or a combination of deficiencies that's less severe than a material weakness, yet important enough to merit drawing the attention of those charged with governance. And the last piece is a material weakness. And a material weakness is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies that leaves us to believe that there's a reasonable possibility or a known possibility that there could be a materially misstated item on the city's financial statements that wasn't able to be prevented or detected by the controls associated with the city. Something that did come to light, and I talked about this earlier inside of the fiscal year 21 financial statement audit, is we do have a material weakness, but I don't want gasping or panicking to occur because I think that there's an important discussion point to be had inside of this, and that's that the area that we're issuing this material weakness on is over the self-insurance fund. This is a fund that's been around for forever. Management has not changed their assumptions. There wasn't a change in process. It came about as an area under our audit methodology that changes year over years, that we took a deeper dive into how the calculation of the incurred but not reported liability. So this is when we draw the line at the sand at year end, the company, right, has to make a guess at how many claims are out there that participants in the plan have made, but hasn't yet hit, right? We all know doctors' offices are notoriously slow for, billing and all of that. So there's this actuarial and all these assumptions that are made to come up with a number. One of the nice resources that has occurred in our expansion to become BDO is our access to, specialists inside of these things. So we have a whole insurance advisory team that reviews this information. And we found that our advisory team came up with one number based on and compared it against what the city's third-party consultant had come up with. And there was a difference between those two numbers. That difference arrived to what we call a material weakness, that what the third-party organization came up with wasn't in line with what government accounting standard boards would require. This matter was quickly addressed. The management was very good at, obtaining all the information that was necessary. So there's a corrective action plan that has already come about on how to ensure that something like this doesn't occur going forward. But certainly, like I said, I don't want anyone to feel like they should be concerned or stressed about this matter. It's been, looked at. It was an area that's been around for a long, long time. I changed my auditing procedures and something came to light and it's since been corrected. So hopefully there won't be any matters with that going forward. But that's the one area under internal control over financial reporting that we listed. It's important also that this council understands that we don't provide an opinion over the effectiveness of internal controls. We just report that if we tested them and something came to light, that we make that communicated and known to all of you. We didn't, like I talked earlier, there weren't any other significant changes in accounting policy that really need to be brought to light for you. One thing that the council may not know is that, from my side of things, we have unfortunately not been able, I would have preferred to present this to you much earlier in the year. We did experience delays on BDO's side of things with some delay in review work, and there's a national shortage of accountants. So I just want you to know that your internal teams are very good at providing us information timely. Jennifer and I have a really great relationship, and we've worked to communicate a very good schedule for fiscal year 23 to ensure that we mitigate these delays, to make sure you guys get back on track to seeing these financial statements, late in the year or early in January, so it can be looked at in a more timely manner. So at this point, I would open the floor to any particular questions that you guys might have.
Thank you very much. Do we have any particular questions? Or maybe general overview questions related to your presentation, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Good. Okay. Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Abby. Very well done. I'm on a board. I'm a liaison to the Albany County Tourism Board. And I was just curious if you had any suggestions. They have had a really rough time finding a firm to do an audit. They were way behind. The state gave them some extra time, as they did, as the state did many other organizations. But since you're doing some of the cities, would that be a possibility that you would be available to do some of the boards that are affiliated with the city?
So that's a really great question. And actually, Albany County Tourism Board was a legacy client of our firm. And unfortunately, due to staffing issues, we had to help that team find another organization. I was able to put Scott in contact with a firm out of Casper to assist in getting through the short-term needs. Certainly, we don't like to say goodnight or goodbye to clients that we've had for a really long time, but certainly we were glad we landed them someplace to get them through the immediate crunch. But we certainly, always want to support local. If it's a joint powers board, a special district, the municipality, the county, all of those things, we want to be a part of that because you're our community and you're where our taxpayer dollars are, and the jobs that we have support members of the community. So certainly I would encourage, if there are other organizations that are interested in audit services, that they reach out to us and we can talk about capacity and scheduling.
Do you see that possibility of the shortage coming in years ahead? Is this going to be something that the board is going to have to look at down the road then?
So it is something that is facing not just small entities, but large entities nationwide. There's something called the academic cliff that maybe some of you have heard about coming. We depend on annual grads every year, and with the COVID pandemic and all of that, accounting is a hard degree for people to want to enter into. So there's small numbers there, and then if we miss a year where students didn't come in, we're anticipating probably 2 to 3 more years of shortages nationwide for accountants. So hot commodities, but it makes it really difficult for us to find the bandwidth to offer all the services to everyone that we want to.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Other questions? I have a question.
All right.
And that is that I think there's often a desire for knowledge on the part of the public or the citizens with regard to what the city does for audits. And of course, you've just gone through an excellent presentation about that for us. And my question for you is that when I've looked into this myself so that I had a better answer for constituents and interested folks in the public, I've said that what I've learned is that it's not as standardized for municipal governments across the country as people might hope. But at the same time, there are general best practices, and there are people that look, at communities in any given state or county, and firms like yours are able to assess whether those kinds of practices are in place, and then provide advice and feedback to the city on those things. And that's largely an element of what you've talked to us about tonight. But I would, if you would, just a little bit expand for the council a little bit about what goes into setting those sort of best practices, and how a firm like yours then ensures that the city of Laramie follows those. And I ask that question because it's my understanding that there isn't a national standard, for instance, like there might be for something in the private sector, perhaps. Could you touch on that just a little bit for us?
Sure, absolutely. So the realm of government is special in and of itself. You all know that. You all sit here and represent that entity. So governmental auditing is, there are definitely things that are standardized nationwide. We all, function and report underneath governmental auditing, accounting standards boards. I audit you under generally governmental auditing standards. But what makes it, you can't compare Colorado to Wyoming a lot of times, and that bridges back to the knowledge of your state statutes. For example, in the state of Wyoming, all governmental entities are subject to governmental auditing standards, which is where we look at those internal controls. And I feel like, as an auditor in my body of experience, that's where really everyone gets the most benefit out of the financial statement audit. Yes, we all get the big, pretty ACFR and we can see all the financial statements and we see all the numbers. But at the end of the day, that governmental auditing standards where we look at how do those internal controls function? Did we comply with state statute? Do we have any other laws or regulations that we need to be concerned about? That's where I really feel like the value add comes in. So Wyoming is lucky. Maybe some people don't think it's lucky, but I think it's great that if you guys would become subject to that governmental auditing standards, because in the state of Colorado, you don't just generically get that. That comes if you have a federal single audit, so that grants audit. So I feel like, yes, everyone nationwide is issuing the same type of audit opinion, but the fact that we can be local and we know the individuals and we have a long-term relationship, we can get to know the entities, provide them with recommendations if we see something because of that look at your internal controls that can be value added to the organization. Mayor Weaver, you talked about it's hard to know. People ask all the time, well, what does the audit mean? What is any of that? Certainly, that's where I feel like, auditors we need to be better. And that's why I'm really thankful for this presentation tonight. Nobody knows what the word means, right? Oh, you got your audit. And you're like, great. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it not? That's where we need to do a better job as auditors, educating you guys on what did we do? How did we do it? What were the results? What's really, the outcome that is beneficial that we can keep moving forward to ensure that the city does have its best practices in place and in line with state statute and any other laws and regulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think there's always more for us as council members and certainly members of the interested public, and having that available so people can educate themselves or at least figure out what questions they'd like to ask is always an area where there's room for improvement. And so we appreciate your presentation and your answers for our questions and putting it into a format that is easily referenced. As you say, most of us are not accountants. It's very difficult. I'm very glad I'm not an accountant. And I hope that we find some people that want to do that in the near future very soon based on what you tell me.
That's right. If you know someone good with numbers, they'll always have a job in accounting.
So we appreciate that. And I don't see hands popping up for any questions right now. So I think at this point, we'll move on to the next portion of this. And we'd like to thank you again for spending your Tuesday night with us to tell us about the findings.
Sounds great. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you, Jen.
Director Wade, what's up?
Okay, for the second part of our presentation, I will be presenting a brief overview of our annual financial report, and then I'm going to give you a tour of the 2021 report. And I will try to do this in perhaps a little bit more condensed way than I initially envisioned. What I'd ask, I'm going to share my screen and run through a brief presentation. I would ask anyone who has questions along the way to please raise your hand, pop in. If I don't see you, don't be bashful. I'm happy to take questions as we go along, but of course I will pause for questions before we start our actual tour of the 2021 report.
Thank you. And thank you for kind of outlining that format. So council folks, just jump in there. Don't wait for me to say, oh, council member, just get your question to Director Wade.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay? If there are any issues, speak up. If not, I'm going to go. Thanks. So the goals of this work session are fairly simple. We'd like to introduce the City Council and any members of the community who may be attending to our annual financial report and talk about staff responsibilities in the preparation of this information. I'm going to just scrape the tip of the iceberg with some accounting knowledge that I think is essential to using the report because I feel like a financial document of this length intimidates a lot of users, and I'd like to increase this accessibility from the start. I'll provide an overview of the specific report sections, and I'll offer a brief tour, as I said before, of our 2021 report. So city staff members prepare the annual report. So auditors, that is so not part of their responsibility. So their job is to come in and provide an assurance service. And they do that based on certain testing and risk assessment, as Abby indicated earlier. So it's a very different type of accounting practice than financial accounting and reporting. In the process of preparing the ACFR, we actually substantiate our balance sheet accounts fully with documentation from external sources to ensure that we have balances that are correct and free of material misstatement. We also perform variance analysis on income statement accounts even to make sure that we don't see trends that could indicate a misclassified transaction during the fiscal year. And this work is in addition to all of the systems that we implement during the year to ensure correct information. So first and foremost, this report is management's responsibility, and Abby alluded to that earlier. We're fully responsible for its preparation in accordance with GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. That's one of the 3 acronyms I'll use repeatedly this evening. We cannot say as management that we don't know GAAP. If we did not know GAAP, we would have to contract with someone who did, and that would not be our auditor, because the auditors have to remain independent. And so it's important that you have qualified staff or contract those qualifications out so that you can prepare your annual financial reports. And finally, we are responsible for the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control systems that allow fair financial statements that are free of material misstatements from being presented. And this is what Abby was talking about earlier, the material weakness of our financial reporting that the auditors found this year in their testing. Ultimately, it's our job as management to make sure that all of our systems for reporting transactions and events prevent material misstatement. And so that, again, is our responsibility. The auditors don't come in and consult on internal controls. If we were to want them to do that service, I think it might actually impair their independence. We might have to go elsewhere. That's not in the scope of the services they provide. We do have an annual audit requirement per state statute. And I'm not going to read over this requirement, but as a matter of public record, I wanted it documented so that everyone knows that we actually have to have an audit conducted. And what is the ACFR? Well, it's a standardized best practice format for annual government financial reporting prepared in accordance with GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. Yes. Yes.
And where is it that sets up the city's requirement? Is that a state statute?
It's a state statute, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your question. So the ACFR is completely standardized. So I don't get to make decisions about what makes it in and what doesn't. We don't get to include subjective information. It is quantitative. And it is considered the best practice report for government financial reporting. We don't have to prepare an ACFR. We could prepare a lesser annual financial report, but we choose to do so because it is that gold standard. It includes multiple sections, which I'll run you through in more detail later in the presentation. And we also elect to participate in the Government Financial Officers Association Certificate of Excellence for Financial Reporting Program. For 44 years, the city has received this award. And what this means is that after our audit is complete and the opinion and the financials are issued together, our ACFR then goes to a team of technical experts that works with the GFOA to actually subject the ACFR to further technical review. So we are always incrementally improving that ACFR based on anything we might find from the audit. This year, I've been at the city 11 years. This is the first finding we've had in 11 years. But we are always incorporating the review we get from our technical experts based on that GFOA review. I'd like to talk a little bit more about GAAP. GAAP are a set of standards and interpretations for the accounting and reporting of financial transactions and events that are promulgated by standard settings bodies. And I want to pull out a few pieces of this definition that I think are really important to understanding audited financials. So standards and interpretations. So this is consistent guidance from standard setting bodies. And there's 2 standard setting bodies in the US. There's the Financial Accounting Standards Board, the FASB, which sets standards for private and not-for-profit entities, and the Government Accounting Standards Board, which sets standards for government entities. So it's not true at all that government doesn't have standards and operates under a different type. It's true that government operates under a different type of guidance, but the guidance we operate under is every bit as complex as our private sector counterparts. And I think sometimes there's some misconceptions that we don't have rules or our rules are lesser, and that's simply not true. The other thing I'd like to talk about is the idea of financial transactions and events. And so I think it's really easy to look at a financial report and say, okay, I can see these transactions and I can visualize them maybe passing through a cash register, or I can envision resources changing hands. But in reality, as Abby indicated earlier, there are all types of financial events that accountants recognize in the preparation of financial reports. Some of those items are allowances, which I think Abby did a great job covering. But then there are also perhaps financial guarantees that maybe haven't come to be, our future commitments. And we have to consider all of those things. Even I have to look at all your council actions for the year to see if there are any unrecognized financial events that I might need to account for. And that often involves judgment. And so even though we have standards that are principles-based and they cover a wide variety of things, there's actually a fair amount of judgment in accounting, and that's why it's a profession. Our standards moved to a principles-based model rather than a rules-based model many, many years ago. And that's because there are so many types of transactions and events that accountants could encounter that it would be folly to think that we could come up with a rules-based system that might address all of those. And if we have a rules-based system, what might that encourage? Well, it might encourage financial statement fraud. And I think we saw a lot of that in the late 90s and 2000s. And so there was this big shift from rules-based to principles-based in accounting, and we've held with that. And I personally am actually really happy with that move. Wyoming state statute also requires municipalities in Wyoming to use GAAP. So I don't have an option if I were to want to go account for things on the cash basis, which means when cash comes in, I record it. When cash goes out, I record it. I could not do so because state statute says I have to use GAAP. And as Abby indicated earlier, GAAP is an ever-changing landscape. We have new standards implemented every year. A normal accounting standard, an easy one, takes between 8 and 16 hours to implement, so not too bad. A major accounting standard like pension accounting or the new lease standard that we'll be implementing this next year takes upwards of 160 hours of work, and that might be an underestimate. And so they really range depending on the impact on our accounting and financial reporting. Why are GAAP important? Well, because they provide commonality for disclosures, for how entities account for transactions. So you want to know that like transactions are accounted for similarly between comparable entities. And the end goal really is that you want financial statements that users can rely on to make good decisions. And users can't rely on financial statements if they aren't comparable and if they don't know how the information presented on those financial statements is actually measured. So what's in a financial statement? Well, it depends. It depends on if it's a balance sheet or an income statement. And I will use those terms colloquially this evening because it's actually, the balance sheet is a title of one governmental financial statement, but the income statement isn't. I choose to use those terms throughout this evening's presentation when appropriate, just to increase accessibility. I don't feel I need to give the technical name of each statement to help users understand what we're talking about. So the balance sheet, or the statements of net position in our ACFR, measure the balances at the end of the fiscal year. So it's a point-in-time measurement. You're going to find assets, liabilities, deferred inflows and outflows of resources, and net position or fund balance on these statements. Whereas the statements of activities and statements of changes in net position or fund balance, we're going to call that the income statement for short, contain the measurement of activity during a period. So you're going to see revenues, expenses or expenditures, and other financing sources are uses as the type of activity on this report. And what we want to remember is that the income statement represents the change from the prior year's ending balance sheet, net position or fund balance, and the current year's ending net position or fund balance. So that income statement is the gap in between. It represents the change. I think that's the easiest way to think about that statement and its articulation to the balance sheet or statement of net position. And furthermore, what's in a financial statement number? It seems like it would be simple, right? A number is a number, but that isn't necessarily the case because in government, we actually have two measurement focuses and bases of accounting. And this is what makes government accounting really unique and I think hard for many people to master. So the gap that apply to government financial statements depends on the type of statement being prepared. Governmental fund financial statements are prepared using a current financial resources measurement focus and modified accrual basis of accounting. This approach accounts for resources that impact near-term liquidity. If I try to explain it just layman's terms, I would say it's really similar to the type of planning we would do maybe in a budgeting process. And so as the GASB was figuring out the financial reporting framework for government, they actually were thinking about users of government financial statements and the budgeting process, and that budget being legally adopted spending authority, and how that differs from private corporations and why governments might need financial statements that look a little bit different. And so for my part, personally, I actually love that part of government financial reporting has this different measurement focus and basis of accounting, because what we want is we want transparent financial statements. And most governments don't operate and plan using an economic resource measurement focus and accrual basis of accounting. However, that basis and measurement focus is what's used on our government-wide statements and proprietary fund statements. That approach is all about economic resource measurement. And I'm going to give you some examples on the next slide. We won't belabor this point. And because I'd like to accelerate the presentation a little bit tonight, make sure we get to the sections on the report I really want to address, I'm going to give you first the measured pension accounting, because it's the funniest and strangest in my opinion. So on the modified accrual basis, pension expense would be recorded on this as the city's contribution to Wyoming retirement system. So our statutorily required contribution plus if the city elected to cover any of the employee's expense. On the accrual basis of accounting, pension expense is actually recorded as the proportionate share of Wyoming retirement system's actuarially determined net pension liability. And so that's the measurement. And there's a big gap between those two numbers. And so you really have to understand that this difference exists when you're using a government's ACFR. Because if you don't know that, you might look at statements in relationship to each other and feel really overwhelmed. There are some awesome financial statements that actually reconcile the difference between these bases of accounting that I'm going to point out when we look at the ACFR. I mean, that's why I'm choosing to condense this slide, because I think you're going to see it later on. The ACFR, as I said, has multiple sections. The introductory section is just that. It's the shortest section of the report. It has some information that we need to put in there, including the org chart and the list of officials. There's a financial section. This is probably what most people think of when they think of an audited financial report. You'll find our auditor's report, management's discussion and analysis, which is a great section of the report that really explains changes during the year, your basic financial statements, the notes to the statements. Every time I get a chance to say this, I do. These notes are essential to understanding financials. I understand why users maybe don't want to read the notes from front to back. But if a user is really trying to understand a balance, the notes are a great place to go to get additional information about a number, or you can always call study staff. We're happy to talk about these things at any time. You'll also find required supplementary information, combining financial statements and supplemental information in this section. Again, what goes in each of these sections is not a matter that I can exercise judgment over. I have to put certain things in them in a certain order, and we do that when we prepare our ACFR. Closing out the ACFR, you find the statistical section and the other section. So the statistical section, we'll spend a little bit of time on that tonight. You'll see financial trends, revenue capacity, debt capacity, demographic, and operating. And there's the financial trends section, I think in particular, is really cool, and we'll take a look at it. You actually can see 10 years worth of trends for changes in net position and fund balance, and some are, I'll call it the income statement for the city. And I think that a lot of users might really enjoy that. And then at the end, we end with other, which includes the auditor's report and the schedule of findings and responses. A few highlights from the 2021 report. We had an unmodified opinion, but with one material weakness disclosed. Abby did a great job discussing that. We actually will be working with the consultant who has provided this liability estimate in the past to ensure that future estimates are prepared in accordance with GAAP. And we'll be doing additional procedures over that number. So even though a consultant prepares this number, I actually don't get to say, oh, well, that's their responsibility. I can contractually say, you must prepare this in accordance with GAAP, but I also can't subvert my judgment to them, if that makes sense. And so because of this finding, we will be doing additional procedures over that work. The adjustment to the internal service fund and government activities net position was $364,000 about. and it actually increased net position. So our liability was overstated, resulting in a more conservative financial statement. In governmental fund balances, at the end of the year, we had $68.5 million, a 22.6% increase, or $12.6 million increase from the prior year. There was a $9.4 million increase in the general fund and a $6 million increase in the specific purpose tax fund. Now, as we all know, that increase in the specific purpose tax fund was from collections of the 2018 tax. And so there was nothing unique going on there. But I would like to talk about the general fund because there was some pretty crazy stuff for the city's general fund going on in fiscal year 2021. Expenses declined actually, but only by $50,000 from the prior year. And that actually was due to the major staff attrition we had at the city and the spending freeze that the city manager didn't thaw until the end of fall in fiscal year 2021. Sales and use tax revenue grew by $3 million or 27%. We estimate that $1 million of this increase was one time, it won't be ongoing, due to wind energy development. And we received $4.3 million in pandemic-related federal aid from our successful Coronavirus Relief Fund, CARES Act applications, and American Rescue Plan non-entitlement unit revenue replacements. And so this was a bigger increase than we would normally see in the general fund, particularly because of these additional revenue sources. In governmental activities net position, we ended at a balance of $64.9 million, which was a $3.1 million decline from the prior year, broken out by having net program-related expenses that totaled $31.2 million, offset by general revenue, special items, and transfers that only totaled $28.1 million. In business type activities, we had a $169.2 million net position as of June 30, which was a $10.9 million increase from the prior year. Net program-related revenue totaled $7.6 million, and general revenue, special items, and transfers totaled $3.3 million. Charges for services income grew by $1.1 million due to consumption changes and development activity. There were no rate increases implemented. So this was variability based on volume, really, not rates. And wrapping up highlights from the 2021 report, we had the implementation of 2 accounting standards. I think that Abby did a really good job touching on those, and I don't see the need to go over them further. I will note for you that the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund used to be a fiduciary fund. It is now a special revenue fund. The city was not doing anything wrong. It's just that the GASB clarified its guidance for what could be, what was an allowable reportable activity for fiduciaries. And so the guidance was actually fairly paltry and weak. And the GASB finally decided to address it because they felt it was causing lack of comparability between users and could perhaps lead to poor decision making. The other standard that was implemented this year was a renaming of the annual report to the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or what we'll affectionately call the ACFR from now on. It used to be the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and that acronym was actually a derogatory, I believe perhaps even racial slur in South Africa. And so the standard setting board they decided we can't have that. And so we just switched the first 2 words of the annual report's name. And at this time, I will actually stop sharing and see if there are any questions before moving on to my brief tour of the 2021 report.
You heard it, Council. Better keep going, Director.
Okay. Thank you for being patient with me as I shift gears. So of course, the annual financial report is published on our website. You also receive a copy of it as members of the council. We would distribute it to anyone who asks because we love to get out information about the city's financial condition and activities. I'm going to just highlight some major sections for you this evening. So on page 8 of the report, users can read the full audit report. So it's there for anyone who wants to see it all year long. The audit report uses standardized language, so users would be able to actually probably find information on their own about auditor responsibility and management responsibility. We are happy to always explain that. Abby did a great job tonight, but this is there and accessible for anyone who would like to use it. The next section of the report I would like to point out is the management's discussion and analysis. And in my opinion, this is 20 pages that are well worth a user's time. And they're worth a user's time because it condenses the financial activity and results of operations from the period into 20 pages of narrative discussion that describe why those changes happened. Can't be subjective, that's not what the ACFR is about, nor can it forecast, that's not the purview of financial reporting, especially audited financial reporting. We could perhaps have that debate for budgetary reporting, right? And so this is a great section for someone who just wants to get their feet wet a little bit more, that maybe feels intimidated by this report, just to start out here with 20 pages and see what you find. I think you might enjoy it. Next, I'll bring us to page 34, which is the start of the basic financial statements. And I'm actually going to go through these statements quickly, but individually, because I think it's important for council and members of the public to understand a little bit about what these statements are. So we lead off with the statement of net position and the statement of activities. These are our government-wide statements. So you're not going to see funds here. You're going to see consolidated totals. And these statements are prepared using that economic measurement focus and accrual basis of accounting. I'd also like to point out the unique format of the statement of activities. It is program-based, and so what you'll find are program-based expenses, program revenue, and the net of those items offset by general revenues. And I'll point out here that you'll see general revenues, of course, in governmental activities, there's a lot there, right? You see sales and use tax that are not restricted to other purposes, mineral and severance taxes. You don't see any of that in business type activities, nor should you, because those operations are primarily funded by charges for services. Moving on to the fund statements, we lead off with the balance sheet for governmental funds. And so these governmental fund statements, you guys are the ones that are prepared using that current financial resources measurement focus and modified accrual basis of accounting. So what you're going to see on the governmental fund statements are the funds that you would be used to in the budgeting process. And you're going to see a measurement here for transactions that's pretty similar, actually, to what you see in your budget documents. There are only some slight differences. So you'll see the general fund, the specific purpose tax fund, the capital construction fund, and the consolidated total for non-major governmental funds. Non-major is very specifically defined in the GAAP. There's a statement later in the CAFR that does show those specific funds, but on this intro statement, they are rolled up. The next statement is a reconciliation of the balance sheet to the statement of net position. This is the reconciliation that really shows users how transactions and events are accounted for differently between these statements and the government-wide statements. And so this is the section I was talking about earlier, where users who really want to see these differences can see them by type. And we do balance these things out. And so this is it. We move on to what we'll call the income statement for governmental funds and the reconciliation of that statement to the government-wide total. So that's very conceptually consistent, at least once you get it. Moving on from those government fund financial statements, we move to the proprietary fund statements. Here you'll see the water, wastewater, solid waste, and internal service funds. Now these statements are prepared using the accrual basis of accounting and economic resources measurement focus. So these totals are not necessarily the same. Well, some of them could be the same as what you see in budget reporting, but there's going to be much more variation in these totals to what you would see in a budget publication, and I will point that out to you. Closing out the proprietary funds, there's a statement of cash flows, and then we lead in with our notes. I've said my spiel about the notes. They are a great resource. Later in the report, there are budgetary comparisons, so you can see based on what the city, I went a little bit too far here. These are combining statements. Okay, so these are the combining statements. I'm going to back up a little bit that show the other city funds. So economic development, rec center, E911 fund, it's all here. And then we move on to budgetary comparisons. So there's a lot of great information here for council members and citizens that I think can be really useful to getting a better understanding of our operations. And then the last section of the report I'd like to highlight is the statistical section. And if you'll recall, in my initial presentation, I said that part of the statistical section are 10-year schedules that show the changes in net assets or net position and fund balance. And these are those statements. You can see from 2012 to 2021, how those components of, in this case, net position have changed over time. You can see the same thing for the related income statement. And there's all kinds of great information back here. I don't think this is a report that most people probably read cover to cover, and I understand that. But I've tried to highlight this evening some sections that I think are really useful and accessible in starting to scratch the surface. What I will also say, I'm actually going to stop sharing because I'm done using the CAFR, is that city staff really are so happy to sit down with counselors, members of the public, whomever, and talk about how we account for things, the ACFR, whatever may be on people's mind regarding how we do business. It's important that we have transparency. We have a lot of great plans with our ERP software project for how to increase the availability of information to members of the public. And we get excited about this stuff. And I feel like because these reports are rather long and admittedly technical, it's off-putting. And I totally get it. But we are here and available whenever anyone is ready to talk about it or if they want to. So if you hear members of the public say, hey, I wish I knew about this, please get them in touch, and we'd love to have lots of conversations with them. And at this time, I would open it up for questions.
Councilmember Doherty.
I'm glad we're recording this because then we could look at it with your your run through on one screen and then read it up close. I'm really glad you love your job and that you work for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Doherty. Questions for Director Wade? All right. Well, I can't think of a better time as we move into the city's budget process to talk about how folks can learn more about the city's finances and how those are channeled and how they're tracked over our biannual budget years. So we will keep that in mind and encourage people when they ask us questions to go to the source materials and to encourage them to feel free to get in contact with the public employees that understand these issues better than any of us. And we'll do that. I see Councilmember Somerville's got a hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a question. Ms. Wade, I just wanted to comment what a wonderful job, again, you guys are doing. The documents, the reports, going through everything. I wish my accountant talked to me like that. It would be such a much better experience, right? Just a huge thanks to your department. I know that there's a lot of stuff coming up on your department's plate, but we can't ever let this piece of it slide. And so kudos to you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mayor, if I could add one more thing, actually, and I appreciate that you brought up the budgeting piece. So tonight we're dealing with the audited financial report, which necessarily is historical in nature. As we move into budget season, we will be looking at reserves, forecasting, and the future. And really, in my mind, that's where I live more, not in the past. And so if you find yourself wanting for that type of information, that actually would be, at least in my professional opinion, outside the scope of tonight's work session, and we will absolutely get to it in our budget work sessions that are scheduled in April and May. Thank you for letting me add that piece.
Of course. And I think for council members or members of the public that are interested in getting the complete picture, it would be good to look into both, or at least pay attention to those meetings that we have about both. I see the Vice Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I originally raised my hand because Malia Brown has her hand raised in the attendees room. So I'm wondering if we can get her moved in. Yeah, here we go. And And then, yeah, I like the whole, just based on what Jen just said, I like the idea of some sort of those long-term future discussions. I think that'll be great during the budget season and would really appreciate that. So thanks.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Chief Operating Officer Malia Brown is in the room. Did you have something you wanted to add? Please do.
Yeah, yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank Jennifer for all the work she has done. The ACFR is a lot of work. There's a lot of testing. There's a lot of things that you go through. And so I really appreciate all the work her and her staff do. So wanted to thank her. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, appreciate those comments. I think as we move forward with the city government over the years, it's been prioritized to make these reports and our budgeting process as accessible as we can. And we continue to do work, and we continue to see work done towards that end. And we do appreciate it. We do appreciate it. There was a comment made a few weeks ago with reference to another topic, but I think it's relevant to this topic, which is that public agencies, public entities like the city of Laramie have a responsibility to do everything we can to make this information as accessible and as easy to understand as possible, because it's an effort towards increasing that public trust. And it's easier to do that at the local government level, probably, and that's an odd choice of words because it isn't easy, but it's perhaps easier at the local government level to start with that effort than it is at others, and then you can build on that as you go forward. So it's extremely important. Other questions? Okay. Well, I can only add to the thanks that you've heard already. This has been useful and interesting information, and it's provided us with some reference points moving forward. So thank you very much. We do appreciate it, and we look forward to the budget discussions that have been referenced, which are a separate discussion, but coming soon.
Yes. Thank you all very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Same to you. Well, council members, that takes us to a point in our work session now, which, based on my reading of the tea leaves, is going to go pretty quick. Updates and council comments. Councilmember Schmeckel.
Thank you, Mayor. Update out of the Laramie Rifle Range. The Albany County Recreation Board funded berm project is currently underway. It should be completed by early April, which is just in time for an April 9th women's oriented the Artemis Sports Women's event, as well as the April 16th RSO training. There are details available on the website as well. Also important to point out that on June 18th from 10 to 6, there will be a swap meet and vendor show. They'll be featuring archery, BBs, 22s, some competition as well. That's sponsored in part by the Veterans Help Foundation to bring some activity. It's been known to draw in quite a few people from out of town that tend to stay in town for a little bit and eat in our restaurants, and have been featured so heavily here nationally the past couple of weeks. So just want to shout out to them. Also point out that the Laramie Beautification Committee is meeting tomorrow at 4 o'clock down at the tourism office. There is a Zoom option available for those who would like to attend. There's a pretty significant tree discussion to be had for trees in the downtown area for those that would like to learn more about what we can do down there.
Thank you very much. Who's up? Updates, comments. Oh, we have a tie. We're going to go to Councilmember Schuster first. Sorry, Councilmember Gabriel. Seniority, you know.
Oh yeah, seniority.
You guys have both been in local government for 900 years, but we'll go to Councilmember Schuster first.
He's got it.
Yeah. I seem to have an echo.
Sounds okay on this end, Councilmember Schuster.
Okay, we'll go with it. One additional thing at the rifle range, we had a Buffalo Bills revenge shoot last year. There's another one coming up this year. We had 180 participants. from 24 different states, rented over 125 motel rooms, and probably served over 800 meals out of Laramie. So we're pretty proud of that. That's coming up again, and it looks like it'll be sold out. On the swap meet and everything, we have over 40 vendors right now, and they are increasing. On my end, also the Historical Railroad Depot is rented now every weekend for the next 4 months. I am glad to say they are coming back. The big boy will be coming through this year. I'll keep people informed on that date. The Wyoming Territorial Park is meeting at the end of this month. And that's about it. Our building next door at Wyotech's going quite nice. It's over a 95,000 foot expansion and will be filled this year. So we are hoping everything goes good and on time for it, because they've been working out there in sub-zero weather, and I just feel so bad for them. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. I attended the Albany County Tourism Board meeting yesterday, and we were trying to measure, as Council Member Schmeckel talked about, Triple D's visit, Guy Fieri here with Jay's Prairie Rose, Born and Barn, Sweet Melissa's, how that impact might be measured with visitors coming to Laramie. And of course, we had a good time with that, discussing the possibilities. But yeah, we were really thrilled about all the great publicity that Albany County and Laramie has received with the Food Network and Triple D coming to Laramie. And things are looking up with the Albany County Tourism Board. Some really good members, good discussion, and happy to be the liaison for sure. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the updates. Other updates? Councilmember O'Doherty.
Traffic Commission met to discuss the bicycle update to bicycles, to update the language to reflect current devices. And there was a lot of good discussion. We may have more input than you really want, because these folks went through it with a fine-tooth comb and they're still going through it. So we'll get some input for that before we consider it the next time. Thank you.
All right. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let folks know that the Planning Commission did not meet last week, but we have a pretty action-packed agenda next week. And if there's anybody that wants to come hang out with me next week, Monday, that would be great. Seriously, it's going to be a lot of things of interest. Just pop on to the Agenda Center and look at the agenda. It's good stuff. So we would invite.
An invitation from the Vice Mayor to take a look at the Planning Commission. I'll note that she combined Planning Commission and Action Pact in that update for us. So make of that what you will. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know that I can top this one, but I don't believe that I've kind of given a public nod to this, that Laramie Main Street is a semifinalist for the Great American Main Street Award nationally. And I just want to give a shout out to them and the work they do. It's been a busy couple of weeks for them. Lots of activity and fun stuff going on in downtown. That award will be decided at the GAMSA conference, May 16th, 2022. So more to come, but I just wanted to give them a public shout out.
That's great. Thank you. Councilmember Schuster, did you remember something?
Well, yeah, since we were doing invites, I wanted to make sure I invited the entire city council and viewers to the game Thursday night, 6:30, Wyoming women's basketball game. I was at the game, saw Pat, couldn't hit him with anything when I was throwing stuff at him. But, yeah, they won in triple overtime. They'll be playing UCLA this Thursday. Hope everyone makes it. We need more crowd, and I'm glad the students are back for that.
That's great. I want to just let the council know that if you do decide to attend that planning commission meeting, it would be a good idea to take a look at the agenda. Yeah, the basketball stuff is great. It's been fun to watch all that. Other updates and comments? Doesn't look like we have anything. All right. See if so I think we've already addressed public comment at all the spots on the agenda tonight. So, council, before we close the work session, just to remember that we'll be here tomorrow at 6 o'clock for a special meeting, and to make sure that your calendars get checked, because we have quite a few meetings coming up over the rest of this month and into the next 2 months. I know you're aware, but just make sure that you take a look. It's a large amount of meetings on a number of topics. I think that's everything. So we'll close the work session and say good evening. Thank you all very, very much. It's 8:45. Good job. Good night.